The rain fell in soft sheets against the windows of Maple House Shelter, a converted church tucked between two crumbling buildings in downtown Portland. Inside, a few dim bulbs flickered against time-stained ceilings, their glow too tired to push back the evening gloom. The reception desk squeaked every time someone leaned against it, which Sarah Mitchell had learned to ignore after 2 years volunteering there. She adjusted the oversized cardigan wrapped around her blue scrubs, her name tag barely holding on by its last pin. Her shoes were soaked from the earlier walk across town, but she'd made it, as always. Sarah never missed her shift, even when she had nothing left to give. Most of the regulars greeted her with polite nods. Some smiled, grateful for her soft tone or the way she remembered their names. She moved like a candle through the shadowed halls, not fast, but steady, quietly illuminating every space she passed through. Sarah didn't talk much about her past. She'd once been a trauma nurse in a bustling hospital, quick on her feet, trusted, admired, until the day she refused to alter a patient's chart at a supervisor's request. The fallout was swift: accusations, suspension, bills, rent, silence. Her nursing license wasn't officially revoked, but no hospital would touch her after that. Uncooperative had been the word. So she ended up here at Maple House. It wasn't much, but it was still care, still healing, still human. She checked the roster. Only 13 names tonight. Lighter than usual, though the storm would likely push that number higher by midnight. She rubbed her forehead. Another long night ahead. Sarah? The voice belonged to Tom, the night coordinator. Bald, gentle, always chewing spearmint gum. "We've got someone new. Just came in." She turned, clipboard ready. "Name?" He paused. "Didn't say. He's different." Sarah followed Tom through the corridor to the intake area, where a tall figure sat hunched on a bench. A threadbare coat clung to him like wet paper, and a knit cap shadowed most of his face. But what caught her were his eyes, or rather, the absence of them. Thick, milky white. Blindness. Or at least something like it. "He walked in alone?" she asked. Tom nodded. "Didn't ask for anything. Just wanted a place to sleep. He's not talking much." Sarah took a breath, moved forward, and knelt in front of the man. "Hi there. I'm Sarah," she said gently. "Can I help you get settled?" The man tilted his head, his voice low and scratchy. "Just somewhere quiet." She smiled softly. "You came to the right place." Sarah guided the man down the hallway, her hand hovering near his elbow, careful not to startle him. He didn't wear dark glasses like many blind individuals did. His eyes were uncovered, unfocused, drifting somewhere beyond the walls. He moved slowly, but with surprising coordination, as if used to navigating without vision. Still, his shoulders were tight, defensive. "I'll show you to a quieter dorm," she said, adjusting her pace to match his. "Less traffic, and the heating's still decent in that wing." He nodded once. "Thanks." She glanced sideways at him. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, early 40s at most, with stubble on his jawline and a face that might have been handsome once, before time and weather had worn it down. Still, there was something composed about him, something that didn't quite match the rest of his appearance. "I didn't catch your name," she said as they walked. A beat passed before he answered. "Leo." She offered a small smile. "Welcome, Leo." The dorm was empty, its 4 narrow cots lined up against the walls like silent sentinels. She led him to the farthest one, away from the door, next to a radiator that buzzed faintly with warmth. "There's a fresh blanket on the bed," she said, placing his hand gently on the metal frame. "And I'll grab you something warm to eat. Soup's still hot." He nodded again, slower this time. "I'm not picky." She started to leave, then paused. "Do you need anything else? Water, maybe?" He shook his head. "Quiet is enough." Sarah hesitated. There was something in his voice, not fear exactly, but the echo of someone who had spent too long being ignored. She'd heard it before in others who came through the shelter, that quiet exhaustion of being seen as less, as invisible. Back in the kitchen, she ladled soup into a chipped ceramic bowl and found some bread rolls that hadn't gone too hard. When she returned, Leo was still sitting on the cot, not lying down. He faced the wall, hands resting on his lap. "I brought you dinner," she said, setting the tray on the small bedside table. He turned his head slightly. "Thank you, Sarah." The way he said her name made her pause. No one usually remembered it on their first night, especially not in that tone. Not flat or obligatory, but full of something else. Weight. Recognition. She gave a polite nod and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "You have a warm voice," he said. "It makes the dark feel less loud." She didn't know what to say to that, so instead, she smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I'll check on you later," she whispered. And then, quietly, she left him to the silence he'd asked for, wondering why he suddenly made her feel less alone in it. The storm lingered into the next day, casting a gray haze over the city. Inside Maple House, the mood was subdued. A few guests shuffled out early, chasing job leads or simply moving with no real destination. But Leo remained, seated in the same spot Sarah had left him in, listening. When Sarah arrived for her evening shift, she noticed him instantly. He was still wearing the same coat, his hands folded neatly, his face tilted slightly toward the window, though there was nothing to see. "You stayed," she said, approaching him. "I said I needed quiet," he replied, not unkindly. "It's hard to find that out there." Sarah handed him a cup of coffee. He accepted it without hesitation, holding it between both hands like a ritual. Over the next few days, Leo became a fixture in the shelter. He rarely spoke to anyone else, but always to Sarah. And never about himself, only about what he could hear, what he imagined things looked like. He'd ask her questions no one else ever did. "What color is the sky when it's snowing? What does your voice look like? Do people still wear watches? Or do they only look down at their phones?" She found herself enjoying their conversations more than she'd admit. He made her see things she'd forgotten to notice. The way rain hit the roof in patterns, the smell of cinnamon from the shelter's donated tea, the squeak of the hallway floor that meant Tom had come in chewing gum again. One night, when the power flickered and the dorm went dark, someone shouted in panic. Sarah grabbed the emergency lantern and made her rounds, calming everyone. When she reached Leo's cot, he was sitting upright, unfazed. "I guess this makes us equals now," she joked. He smiled. "Not quite. You still see more than most." She sat beside him then, just for a moment, lantern light casting warm shadows on the wall. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Later that night, she brought him a book. "Want me to read to you?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, but when he did, his voice was soft. "Yes, I think I'd like that." And so she read, chapter after chapter, until her voice was hoarse and his expression peaceful. The next night, the shelter was quieter than usual. A handful of guests had found temporary beds elsewhere, and a calm settled over Maple House like a wool blanket. Sarah arrived early, unsure why. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was the thought of reading to Leo again. She found him in the lounge this time, seated in one of the old mismatched armchairs near the window. The storm had cleared, leaving only the soft hum of traffic and the occasional siren in the distance. He turned his head as she entered, sensing her presence before she spoke. "Hey," she said. "You're early," he replied, a faint trace of amusement in his voice. "Couldn't stay away," she joked, though it wasn't entirely untrue. She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. For a while, they just listened, to the creaking of the old building, to someone snoring in the dorm beyond, to the heater rattling in protest. Then, Leo broke the silence. "Why do you still do this?" he asked. "Do what?" "This. Be here. Help people. It's not glamorous. You don't get paid." She hesitated. Most people never asked. They assumed. But Leo, he listened. "I used to be a nurse," she said finally. "Worked ER for 7 years. Fast-paced. Intense. I loved it. But one day, I was told to change something on a chart. Make it look better than it was. I refused." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than she'd said. "Things fell apart after that. I lost my job. Couldn't find another. I kept trying. Then the eviction notice came and here I am." "And yet, you still heal people," Leo said quietly. She blinked. No one had ever said that before. Not like that. "I guess I couldn't stop being who I am," she whispered, "even if the world stopped seeing me." He leaned forward slightly. "Maybe the world's just looking in the wrong direction." There was a silence that felt full rather than empty. Her eyes stung. From fatigue or something deeper, she wasn't sure. Then Leo said something that lingered with her long after. "You help people find their way, Sarah. Even those of us who've forgotten how to ask." When Sarah arrived the next evening, the cot was empty. Leo's blanket was folded. The tray table cleared. His coat, knit cap, and coffee cup all gone, as if he had never been there at all. She checked the guest log, though she knew he'd never written his name, asked Tom, asked Angela at the front desk. No one had seen him leave. "Maybe he found a better place," Tom offered with a shrug. "People come and go." But Leo wasn't people, not just someone passing through. He had anchored something in her, a kind of stillness she hadn't known she'd needed. Sarah tried to shake it off. Guests disappeared all the time. It wasn't personal, but this felt personal. She returned to her routines, but the nights felt longer, the beds colder, her voice quieter without someone to read to. She kept catching herself glancing toward his old cot, expecting to hear his voice, to see his head tilt toward the sound of her steps. Days passed. A week. Then 2. Still no sign. She found herself walking the routes he might have taken, eyes drifting to park benches, church steps, alleyways behind grocery stores. Nothing. What unsettled her most wasn't the fact that he had vanished. It was how deeply she missed someone she had known for only a handful of days. He had left a space behind. Not loud, but undeniable. One night, while wiping down the common room table, she spotted something tucked beneath the armchair by the window, the one where he'd sat when he asked about her past. It was the book she'd read to him, pages slightly worn, a bookmark still resting halfway through. She held it to her chest and closed her eyes. That was when it truly hit her. Maybe Leo hadn't needed the shelter after all. Maybe he just needed a reminder that kindness still existed. Or maybe, and this was the thought that stuck, maybe she had needed him more than he'd needed her. Either way, he was gone. And somehow, The silence he left behind was louder than anything he ever said. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the letter arrived. Sarah found it wedged awkwardly in her mailbox, nestled between a utility bill and a coupon flyer. The envelope was thick, high quality. The kind you'd expect for a wedding or a gala, not something addressed to someone barely keeping her electricity on. Her name was written in elegant, looping script. No return address. Inside, she found a single cream-colored card, embossed with silver lettering. You are cordially invited to a private benefit hosted by the RS Foundation. A night to celebrate compassion, resilience, and quiet heroes. Saturday at 7 p.m. Attire, formal. Venue, the Sterling Conservatory. Your presence would mean the world. No phone number, no RSVP, just those words. She stared at it for a long time, flipping it over twice, as if a secret would fall out. She'd never heard of the RS Foundation. And quiet heroes? It felt like a phrase pulled from a storybook. Or a memory. For a moment, she considered throwing it away. She didn't have formal clothes, didn't know anyone who would invite her to something like this, but something about the card, the way her name was written, the weight of the paper, the warmth hidden between the lines, made her pause. Later that night, she found herself sitting with Angela at the front desk. "Do you know what the RS Foundation is?" Sarah asked casually. Angela shrugged. "Sounds familiar. Some tech billionaire thing, I think. They fund accessibility programs. Super secretive." Sarah blinked. Accessibility? Her mind jumped. Blindness. A flicker of something. Not quite hope, not quite dread, sparked in her chest. That Saturday, she stood in front of a thrift shop mirror, wearing a second-hand navy dress and a pair of heels half a size too big. Her hands trembled as she tucked the invitation into her purse. She didn't know what she was walking into. But somehow, she felt like she'd been walking toward it for a long, long time. The Sterling Conservatory glowed like a jewel in the night, all glass and steel, wrapped in soft golden light that spilled across the lawn. It looked like something out of another world, or at least one far removed from the corridors of Maple House. Sarah stepped through the main doors, the hush of classical music greeting her like a whisper. Inside, the space was vast. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above manicured plants, and waiters in black vests moved like dancers, carrying trays of wine and hors d'oeuvres. She stood at the threshold for a moment, clutching her purse, wondering if this had been a mistake. Then she heard it. "Sarah." She turned. Leo stood across the room, clean-shaven, tailored black tuxedo, hair brushed back neatly, no knit cap, no threadbare coat. He still moved with quiet certainty, still slightly guarded, still graceful. His eyes were the same, distant, unreadable, yet somehow warmer. Her breath caught. She began, but words failed. He crossed the floor slowly, confidently, as if he had never been blind at all. "You're not," she whispered. He gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "Blind? No, not anymore." She stared. "Why?" Leo stepped closer. "Because I needed to disappear, to see the world as it really is, without filters, without expectation. And I needed to find someone real." Silence stretched between them. Around them, the party continued. But Sarah felt as if the entire room had gone still. "You lied," she said, not angry, just stunned. "I didn't lie," he said gently. "I just let you see who I was, without the noise. You were never homeless." "No, but I was lost." Sarah took a breath, heart pounding. "Why me?" Leo's gaze softened. "Because you saw me. not the clothes, not the silence. You spoke to the man I was when I had nothing. You gave me dignity before you knew I could offer anything in return. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, unexpected and uninvited. This wasn't a test, he added. It was fate. She looked down, shaken, then back at him. Why this party? Why now? He stepped even closer, his voice a hush meant only for her. Because tonight, I want to ask you something. The lights dimmed slightly as a gentle chime echoed through the conservatory. Guests turned toward the small stage at the front of the room, where a man now stood behind a minimalist podium. Richard. That was his real name. Richard Leo Sanford, CEO of a global tech firm, philanthropist, reclusive billionaire, and the man who had sat on a cot in Maple House, asking what the sky looked like when it snowed. He tapped the microphone once, clearing his throat as the room fell into reverent silence. Tonight, he began, we honor the quiet heroes, the ones who show up not for applause, not for recognition, but because compassion is part of their bones. One of those heroes changed my life. He looked out over the crowd, then directly at Sarah. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. She just saw someone in need. And she didn't hesitate. People turned toward her, but Sarah barely noticed. Her heart was thundering too loud. Richard stepped away from the podium and walked slowly toward her. The crowd parted around him like water. His movements were steady, sure. Every eye in the room followed him. When he reached her, he didn't speak right away. He simply took her hand. Then, from his jacket pocket, he drew a small velvet box. Gasps scattered through the room. He opened it. Inside, a simple silver band, elegant and unassuming. Sarah Mitchell, he said softly. I once walked through darkness, believing I had seen everything. But then I met you, and realized I'd never truly seen anything at all. He dropped to one knee. Would you let me keep seeing the world? Through your eyes? By your side? The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah's lips trembled. Tears blurred her vision. But through them, she smiled. Wide, radiant, real. Yes, she whispered. And in that moment, beneath chandeliers and starlight, two lives quietly, irreversibly changed. The clinic stood on the edge of the city, a modern sunlit space nestled between towering oaks and quiet streets. Its glass walls reflected the morning light, open and warm, just like the hearts that had built it. The sign above the entrance read, The Mitchell Sanford Center for Restorative Vision and Healing, to see and be seen. Inside, patients moved through the halls, some with canes, others guided by gentle hands. A mural in the waiting area showed a path winding through shadows into brightness, painted by former shelter residents. It was a place of care, yes, but more than that, a place of dignity. Sarah walked beside Richard, now her husband, clipboard in hand as she made notes from their morning rounds. He wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, his presence unassuming despite who he was in the world beyond these walls. You know, she said, smiling at a patient who waved as they passed, I still can't believe this all started with soup and a blanket. Richard chuckled. And a stubborn woman who wouldn't let a lost man vanish quietly. She nudged him gently, says the billionaire in hiding. He leaned closer. You found me, when I didn't even know I was looking. They paused at the large windows overlooking the courtyard, where a group was gathered for a meditation session. The sunlight poured in, casting golden streaks across the floor. Sarah looked at him, really looked, and he, in return, saw her, fully, deeply, without fear or pretense. A moment passed, And then he spoke, not loudly, just enough for her to hear. "I still want to see the world through your eyes." She reached for his hand, her voice soft but steady. "You already are." And together, they stepped forward, into the light. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring tales just like this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what part of the story touched you the most. Your feedback means the world and helps this community grow.